Can I start? Friends, I welcome you all in this session of International Logistics and Supply Chain Management. This is my first session for this subject. Uh, my name is Saurabh Tiwari, and these are some of my credentials which are available in front of you. So, in this session, broadly, what we are going to discuss about what exactly international logistics means, what are some of the definitions related to international logistics, how international logistics is different from domestic logistics, what are the particular things that are required in order to mobilize international logistics. Then we are going to discuss something related to international commercial terminologies, what are the various terminologies and how it operates and what exactly it means and which are the Incoterms or international commercial terminologies which are generally being used these days. All these things which we are going to discuss in this particular session. So let's start with this session. So this is your as per the material which you have received, international logistics and supply chain management, and I'm going to start with the first unit, which is introduction to international logistics. So, as per Gray and Davies, which has defined international logistics, they say generally international logistics is basically a system in which documentation flows are as much as part of the main logistic flows as flow of products. So, as per Davies and Gray, they see that in international logistics, the importance of documentation is as equally important as the flow of the materials, which was generally not the case with domestic transportation. But in international, the situations are totally different, and documentation is as important as the flow of the material. So, if we talk about business logistics, business logistics is now well established management concepts, and across the globe it is now being used. Uh, so, some other definitions which of international logistics is that international logistics is the process of planning and managing the flow of goods and products in your company's supply chain, which was basically starting from the acquisition of the raw material to finally the product being delivered to the customer purchase, where part of the process involves crossing at least one international border. So when we talk about international logistics, we mean that generally two countries are involved, and that's why they basically discussing about the international border. That in international logistics, you have to cross one international border, where value additions are generally being done, and acquisition of products to customer purchase are part of process of the entire movement of the materials across the supply chain. So this definition basically talks about international logistics. Now, another definition which says that US origin defines the international logistics as nothing but it involves some other aspects which talks about how you're going to negotiate, how you're going to plan the entire process, and the implementation of supporting logistics arrangements, which are occurring between two nations, their forces and agencies. And it also includes furnishing logistics supports, major end items, materials, and services to or receiving logistics support from. So they are not only talking about the involvement of two companies or two parties which under which the trade-off is generally being done, but also involves that how you are going to negotiate in terms of what are the terms and conditions of transportations, through which mode it is going to get transported, how you are going to plan, how you are going to make the arrangements, who will make the arrangement, whether it is the seller or the buyer, or you involve some other parties who will take care of the movement of the materials, and it includes furnishing logistic supports in terms of end items, materials or services, or receiving logistic support one or more friendly foreign governments. Because obviously, when you talk about international logistics, governments also has to play a role. Some international organizations also come into pictures, which are governing the rules and regulations for international logistics. Then sometimes military forces, or with or without reimbursement. So this is they generally talk about from a broader perspective, which basically defines the international logistics. Another definition, the international logistics is a process developing in space and time simultaneously. Because see, what happens when you transport from one country to another, the time is an important factor because there in between some countries there is a lag of 12 hours to 15 hours. So how because the day of departure and day of receiving actually is going to change because it involves the delay part and the in transit part. So that's why they are talking about developing space and times simultaneously. After that, there are set of regulations, rules, and conditions that are needed to be taken into consideration to receive output expected, namely goods delivered to in time to the right place in the right quantity and quality. So again, going back to the same definition which was linked with the logistics: right place, right time, right quantity, right quality, right customer, right amount, and all those things are taken into considerations. So international logistics scope is much more broader as compared to domestic logistics because it not only talking about the flow of the materials, which was particularly the main concern for domestic logistics, but in international logistics the flow is much beyond that. They are talking about the documentation, the parties who are involved, how you are going to negotiate, how you are going to plan. Then foreign governments also come into pictures. Then forces comes into picture, certain rules and regulations. So there are multiple aspects which are taken into consideration and which are part. And then comes the time and space, which is again very critical aspects which are considered as a part of international logistics. And then the basic logistics definition of right quality, right quantity, right amount, right time, right place, all the 7 hours which are involved into the process, that is also there. So, if we talk about what is basically the main goal of any international logistics, why companies or countries go for international logistics? The main goal of international logistics are to match and link the national parts of global supply chain, overcome international trade barriers of different natures, which can be related to political, law, cultural, currency, transportation, language, etc., and to minimize the transaction cost and risk. See, when we go for selecting international supplier, and then only international logistics comes into picture. Sometimes also possible that some companies want to operate in different regions, so they have to shift some of their materials from their parent plant to the plant in which they are being actually being part. So they have to think, they have to overcome some of the they have to overcome some of the blockages. For example, in terms of which are linked with international, which are linked with political, because two countries are involved where the political relations are totally different, the law of the land are totally different, the cultures are different, currencies are totally different, and variation in currencies are there. And then the mode of transportations, whether it is being transported by air or by sea, or even some cases, some transportation international logistics also occurs by road between some countries. Then the language are different, their understandings are different, their requirements are different. So each and everything you have to overcome when you deal, when you're going to deal. And the basic objective is to minimize the transportation cost and the risk associated with the international logistics. So that is the basic idea associated when we deal with international logistics. So so this is a basic logistic concept which was adopted from Lalonde and Grabner. So they say that basically both Lalonde and Grabner and Christopher offer similar representation showing the two techniques of material management and physical distribution management combining to form the logistics system. So if you see that it consists of two parts, one is material management, another is called the physical distribution management. And when these two combines actually makes the business logistics. So Maggie defined logistics as the movement of materials and products from the source to the user, while giving emphasis on mostly the physical movement of things, be it raw materials, semi-finished, manufactured or finished goods. Logistics have also stressed the necessary counterflow of information. Some other authors like Bowersox says that evolution of logistic concept to development of the system approach to solving business problems. So logistics was basically used as a tool in order to solve some of the business problem with a emphasis that necessary trade-offs between components in the system. On the contrary, Christopher says that the components are often different functional areas in the firm, thus emphasizing on one barrier to the establishment of logistics in practice. So, firm organized along traditional function line may be reluctant to rewrite its organizational structure to include logistics as a new line of functions. So the alternative can be of a metric organization has received limited support from other areas of the business. So this is how they do. The value of logistic concept today is much more than it is forced management to be aware of the cost of all aspects of logistic system and that individual element interact with other elements in that system. So seeing the logistic mission is as single system can be necessary. First step, is basically to minimize the total cost involved in optimizing the service provided to the customer. So ultimately, the objective was to reduce the total cost and provide better services to the customer. And total distribution costing is one of the tools of logistics management. So if we talk from the perspective of logistics management, the basic objective was how to reduce the distribution cost. On the dispatch side of the business, it is basically concerned with the balancing of customer satisfaction and distribution cost. Customer account profitability is another analytical method emphasizing on individual customers or distributor as separate costs and profit centers in terms of the cost of supporting the revenue they provide. This is how the business operation uh, business logistics functions operate. As you see, when we talk about from the business logistics, which is nothing but a combination of materials and physical distribution management. So when we say materials management, we basically means the sources of raw materials, sub-assembly, manufactured parts, and packing materials clubbed together in process inventory, which is in transit or semi-finished, and then finally it get converts into finished goods. Now, when the finished goods inventories are ready, they move into the field inventory to different companies and customers, and then finally move to the hands of the customer or user. That is, we are basically talking from the perspective of customer or users that are involved into the physical distribution part of the entire business logistics perspective. So, if we talk from the international logistics, international logistics splits the complex channel of international logistics where goods move as do order payments and documents. So, they said that it is primarily that not only goods move, orders also move, do orders, and then payments and documents also move into three partial channels, which are linked to the extent that sales or payment triggers release of goods to the buyer, and that documentation must be complete before the goods can move forward. So it is necessary that documentation need to be done prior in advance before the movement of the good, because until unless the documents are not being done or the payments are not being triggered, the goods are not going to be released from the buyer side. And finally, in certain cases, it is also happening that when you receive the good, then you make the payment. But documentation needs to be done much more in advance before the flow of the material should be start. So if we talk about the transactional channel, the transaction channels which handling the buying, selling, which involves basically my negotiating and contracting what type of negotiation I want to do in terms of the prices, in terms of the transportation mode or other packaging materials, and then how you're going to do the contract with the between the buyer and the seller, and finally the collection of payment. So that is basically the my transactional channel. Now coming on to the distribution channel. Distribution channel basically means through which good moves fiscally. That means we are basically talking about the fiscal movement of the goods, and all the process related to transaction channel has been completed, and finally the goods started moving. And the third is called the documentation or communication channel. So actually there are three channels which are parallelly moving: transactional channel, the distribution channel, and the documentation channel or the communication channels, which talks about the importance of international logistics. So if we talk from most of economies, the domestic rather than the international context is more relevant. However, the needs to balance trade flows and the stagnation of some domestic market has encouraged a growing interest in exporting and consequently in international distribution. Ideally, the logistic concept should be transferable from domestic to international business with no greater difficulty than applying the concept to one product type and then to another. So there are, however, a number of differences between a national and international distribution, and this is how the difference generally flows. So basically, if we talk from that perspective, then we can say that the three channels that need to be moved, or the complex channels which are part of the international logistics, which is transaction channel, the distribution channel, and the documentation and the communication channel. So if we have to define what exactly is the difference between national and international distribution or international logistics, so they differ basically in three areas, which creates the actual boundary between them. That, as I told you, that in national logistics or domestic logistics, documentation is being prepared, but that is not that critical or not that complex as compared to international logistics. So the first difference is the documentation. Then second is that you have to involve a middleman, or we call it here as a freight forwarder, or a party who is involved in the business of transportation of the freight business. And third is in order processing. So these basically are three important aspects which are basically linked with internet, which basically clearly creates a boundary between domestic logistics and the international logistics. So first is the documentation, which is actually creating the major difference. The second is the involvement of a middleman, and third is in the order processing. So when we talk about order processing, we basically means the organizations are involved, the people are involved, how they do the processing of the orders, what are their practices, which guidelines they follow. So all those things come under in order processing. So let's start with the first part, documentation. So compared with the documentation need to process a domestic sale, the following is true of international transactions. So how it is different in a domestic versus an international trade. So documentation costs are much more higher in international trade as compared to domestic. Uh, the simple reason is that you have to take care of so many different things which are there, which we are going to discuss as we move ahead. Then that involves many parties, many more parties are involved into the transactions, which are part of the documentation process. That makes it more complex and more costlier. Then the issue of financial penalties for errors, especially in document associated with LC, or we call it as letter of credits, are higher, because in this case the banks are involved, and in case of errors, the charges or penalties are heavy, and especially in case when you transact in different currencies, because your buyer might be in one country and seller might be in other countries. So the cost of documentations or the financial penalties for errors are very higher. Then next is the amount of data required to complete the documentation is higher. So there are so many different documentation data which are required in order to mobilize or to move the transaction. So that is also critical, that need to be clearly understood. And the skills and knowledge needed to complete documentation is higher. So you required a special expertise area in order to move ahead with the documentation part, because if it is not clear, then it becomes actually difficult to do the documentations, because there are so many hurdles are there. First, the documentation process is very complex, cost involved is very higher, so chances of errors are very less. Then you involve a third party which issues a LC, which are generally financial banks which are involved. Then fourth, you are dealing in a different currencies, so that is also a major risk. So if you don't hedge, then actually you have put your foot in a wrong shoe. So that is also important. Then amount of data required associated with that in order to do business, that is also critical. So, and then the skills and knowledge needed to complete the documentation. So these are basically associated activities with the documentation part. Then comes, or rather we can say that export documentation is rightly perceived as a problem area, especially by the smaller firms who do not have the expertise and know-how, skills requires, and the amount of data which need in order to complete the process. So we can say that for smaller firms it is actually very difficult. Handling of documentation ranked the highest of the three categories under importance and under difficult in a survey, especially for small exporters or small companies which are operational across the globe. Now, coming on to the role of a middleman, or called the intermediaries, here in this case, it is generally a freight forwarder. So, international freight forwarder is traditionally the middleman uh, between a trader and a carrier. So in precise, if we say that the definition associated with a middleman or with a freight forwarder is very difficult to define and not possible, largely because of the move by forwarders into carriage, but forwarders still handle the majority of the world trade. So estimates of the proportion of a trade they are responsible for range from anything between 50% of manufacture moving by surface to and from, and this is how, and it varies from country to country. In some large domestic markets, there is a role of the forwarder, but in most cases, the trader deals directly with a limited number of carriers. In international carriers or international trade, few carriers outside of some airlines have something like a comprehensive coverage of all the market. So freight purchasing is in this respect more complex in international trade. Both documentation and freight purchasing can be handled by a forwarder on behalf of an exporter. And in some markets, forwarders or custom agents have a partial or total monopoly of the arrangement of distribution activities. So this is how the process of international freight forwarders are generally being done. So most of the activities, whether it is dealing with the cargo or dealing with the shippers, is generally managed by the freight forwarders. The role of the freight forwarders are very critical, especially in case of international logistics. In some of the cases, there are few freight forwarders who also operates in the domestic market, but generally it is the bigger player who operates from the that perspective. So third point, which was basically order processing. So order processing, export orders tend to be dispatched to foreign subsidiaries or agent for them to undertake local sales and marketing. The average export order size is often larger than the general domestic average by one or more orders of magnitude. Credit rating checks, where necessary, tend to be more rigorous, especially on exports, where you have to disclose all your information, data, and the parties are involved into that. So, potential for legal redress in a distance market with a different legal system is generally being diminished in case of an order processing system. So we covered how we differentiate between domestic and international logistics in terms of documentations, then in terms of role of the intermediaries, and the third is basically in the form of order processing. Now come organizations. Uh, The difference between domestic and international distributions are basically could have contributed to the low level of integration, especially if we talk about from the British firms between domestic and international distribution management. Britain is a major trading nation with more than a third of their gross national product emanating from export earnings. So you can see that more than a third, one third of their gross national product generally the incomes are coming from exports. Uh, so what they generally do, they generally try to integrate or they basically try to integrate or uh, basically try to link the export distribution with the export sales rather than with the domestic distribution is particularly noticeable. So wherever integration occurs, it really does so between domestic and international distribution. This does not prove that such integration is either rarely possible or even undesirable. But if international distribution were obviously and closely related to domestic distribution, a higher level of integration might have been expected. The evidence of practical experience seems to emphasize that the difference between the two cited earlier are generally too large to allow for the integration. So integration is not very difficult between a domestic and international logistics. It can be done very easily. Now coming on to control. So there's a strong control argument in favor of integrating export sales and distribution to basically control the delivery promise because that is very important because a slight delay might put you in positions where a heavy penalty is should be there. So that need to be taken into consideration. If we talk from the Davies and Gray, for example, have argued that late delivery could be associated with over-ambitious delivery promises either by the sales team, possibly unaware of the longer lead times required of export orders. Generally, what happens, sales people or sales team generally give a promise to the customers that by within this time we are able to make your material reach into your hands of the customers, but they are not exactly aware of how much is the lead time, which can be easily told by either a freight forwarder or a logistics team where they are aware of how much time it generally takes to mobilize international or export cargo, and so that need to be seen. And if we talk from the perspective, uh, in some countries, exporters are generally encouraged by the government agencies to sell on a delivered price, basically from two reasons. Uh, First is on their preferred terms of sales and purchase in international trade. Respondents tend to fall into two categories: those who wanted to sell delivered and buy X works, and those who wanted to buy delivered and sell X works. So trader tend to want to control or not control the freight element completely. If it is a good business practice to give the customer what he wants, and if the customer wants an X works or FOB price, then he should be sold on such terms. However, many markets their advantage of selling as delivered as price as possible to accrue any benefits from controlling the freight cost. So some of the freight forwarder basically tries or seller basically try to control the freight cost. But in natural terms, we have to deal with the customers and try to find it out what exactly they are looking for in terms of whether they are looking for X factory price or free on board price. So we have to offer the same to the customers. But in some countries, the freight forwarders try to control the freight cost. So in contrast to this, on control of freight expenditure, only one third of respondents who worked with the defined freight budget. So in domestic trade, the seller usually views the distribution system tied to customer doors. In international business, the customer may wish to control the transport element or at least part of it. There are often good reason for this. For example, a large customer company can often use its large purchasing power to negotiate lower rates than a smaller supplier. A company wishing to buy on a near delivered basis may see some advantage in controlling local custom clearances. The supplier may be well advised to leave local delivery from a port or an inland destination, and to his distant customer who is better placed to manage the final stages of delivery. The lower level of use of budgetary control is another symptom of the need to remain flexible on the issue of delivery pricing. Control in international distribution is more necessary in the control of delivery promise to the point at which the customer or subsidiary is giving responsibility to the goods rather than in control of a system of the physical movement of goods from the supplier to the eventual users. So this is basically international logistic concepts. That is how it moves. So the international logistic concepts basically talks about. So business is a cross-line functional mission in the firm, as in international logistics. So advantage held by the later is that shipping manager is often responsible for much of the span of control implied, as shown in the figure, which is basically the international logistic concepts. So is a reason for task and license. So the central task activities, basically, when we talk about, consist of three elements. First is receiving the inquiry, then followed by assembling the order, and third is dispatching the order. So the order received from the customer and returned to him in the form of goods. Two types of outputs are produced. First, the delivery promise and the documentation. So to move from one task to another, the international logistic function called the ILF has to liaise with the other functions, internal and external to the firm. Credit rating may be possible within the firm or may require contract with an external body which ensures the exporter's risk from commercial default or political action. Moving to the second task, the essentially domestic operation in the firm need to be consulted regarding the availability of stock or the lead time on supply. The ILF can now produce its first output of significance, the delivery promise. Liaising with the rest of the firm regarding the stock allows the assembly of the export order, but before the order can be dispatched, the goods will be insured. The forwarder, if employed, will need advising, and the ILF will need to ensure that it has assembled the data required for documentation. So, on regular tariff flows, many companies undertake their own forwarding, and either the ILF or the forwarder responsible for both the shipping and forwarding rules contributes to export efficiency. One function can achieve an overview of the export process. The third task elements, which is basically the dispatch order, should be seen therefore as a combination of domestic dispatch management and international forwarding. In countries where traders cannot undertake many of the forwarder activities, this will limit the ability to manage the kind of system. Forwarding should also be taken to mean the necessary arrangement to deliver the goods in time to the point where the customer requires control. If the terms of sale are strictly ex works, the provision of commercial invoice is all the that which is required. If the terms are FOB or similar, the goods have to be meet a carriage service. On the contrary, if the terms are CIF, free delivered or FOB plus freight services, the responsibility extends to the customer territory. Interposing forwarding as a necessary task element for the ILF does not reflect the reality of business practice, although many firms will be in position to impose delivered terms and are able to be as a part of the ILF task elements. So this is how it works. Customers uh, give a order, receive inquiries by the companies. They give a delivery promise that by this time you will be able to do that. Then they do the credit rating checking, then followed by the domestic system where the assembly of the order takes place. Then you involve the insurance banks and freight forwarder where the transportation activity or the dispatch activities are actually started. So dispatch order including forwarding. So this is how. So the the straight line basically talks about the order, and the dotted line basically talks about the management information flows. So delivery promise and external documentation. So this is how your entire international logistics actually operates. ILF basically stands for the International Logistics Functions, and this is how they have to operate or they move the task from one part to the another. Now, how we are going to mobilize or basically what are the various ways or the methods to drive efficiency in international logistics. When we talk about international logistics, generally there is a strong coordination that need to be done between across the parties who are operating. So if we talk that in order, if your international supply chain partners aren't able to operate at optimal efficiency, they pass increased pricing to your company. So this is the first thing that if they are not able to optimally utilize the efficiency, it will lead to increase of passing on the pricing to your company. Second, when partners do not meet your expectations, so when they are also not able to meet what is the expected services required from them, it's actually difficult to standardize the logistic flow. Logistic flow can only be standardized when your partners are able to meet or respond to your expectation of the speed, which reduces efficiencies and increases the level of commitments to your goals. So this is how the levels and commitments actually changes. And contrary, if add the extra time your personal spend working through the chaos to the cost of the resulting inventory sub-optimization and have the current state of international logistics management. So this is how they have to operate under different conditions, which talks about increasing the efficiency on the international logistics. So if we talk about inefficiencies, so if inefficiencies are amplified if your company is missing the five following components which are part of the international logistics operations. So first one is called the strong partnership. So strong partnership is required between the buyer company and the seller company and all the intermediaries who are operating mobilizing the cargo. Then there should be a standardization of the entire logistic flow. Then it should be visible. There should be a proper communication between all the channel members, and finally you have the full control. So let's start discussing one by one. When we talk about strong partnership, what exactly do we mean? The international supply chain partners share a general lack of trust. So generally, what happens when the trade is outside the country boundary or between a foreign player? So lack of trust is something which is generally missing. So many companies have been burned in the past and are unwilling to make a commitment to anything out of the sector now. So even if they do not agree to work with a standardized proactive model that provides communication and visibility, they likely will be unable to deliver on the commitment due to inefficient process. So ultimately, everything boils down to inefficient processes. In other logistics, uh, in other international logistic relationships. Building strong partnership requires a serious effort to communicate and demonstrate your own level of commitment to your vision. So, strong partnership is required, which is built on strong trust, proper communication, visibilities, and you have to overcome your inefficiencies and you have to strictly and follow your timeline or time windows in which you are going to operate and provide solution to the partners. The next is standardization. So it is critical to establish standards for each supply chain partners. These standards not only benefit your company, but also drive the same consistent, reliable flow for each partners. Now, to establish Trust within your supply chain. Consider all parties who are involved. In a truckload shipment from the, suppose we talk about a shipment which is moving from US to Mexico, the Mexican carrier which is carrying the truckload shipment must be confident that the shipper, which is the US carrier, Mexican custom broker, and border dredge carrier are meeting their standards. So there are multiple parties who are involved. First in the Mexican truckload shipment, then the US shipper and the US carrier and the custom broker, Mexican custom brokers are all following the same standards and meeting the customer requirements. So when the Mexican carrier knows a trailer will arrive by a designated time, it will proactively allocate a tractor and a rested driver. So they know when the movement the trailer from the arrive on timely basis. So coordination becomes very easy. Now assume the Mexican carrier delivers and drops the trailer on time at the consignee in Mexico, and the consignee loads the trailer within the standards. The carrier is able to proactively plan for pickup at the designated time, ensuring the efficiency equipment utilization. This is how the standard procedure need to be followed and adopted. Now then comes visibility. Sharing service standards build a foundation for efficient, consistent, and reliable logistics flow. Full visibility for each partner in your supply chain enables efficiency. Workload imbalances are amplified in the international region, but as the supply chain partners look upstream, each one is able to plan and allocate resources to assess overall efficiency and ensure higher service level to your organization. So visibility is another critical part which should provide builds us trust among each channel members who are working, and full visibility for each partner in your supply chains also help us in increasing the efficiency because everyone is knows how the entire supply chain or how your supply chain partners look upstream and they can plan their downstream efficiently for which they have to allocate their resources in order to increase the providing better or higher service level to the organization. Now then comes communication. Now factors that affects the standardized flow or complex supply chain, such as inclement weather or heightened border security, will always be present. So, enabling proactive communication downstream allows each supply chain partner to take immediate action as needed. So, when you are crossing one boundary, you also have to understood what are the various stages, steps which need to be taken before starting with the process, and you can plan your activities much more in advance so that it is not going to affect in any way your entire business opportunities or your entire business process. And timely communication will help us in smooth flow of the cargo from one location to the another. And this helps in managing and movement of the cargo smoothly across one boundaries because you are proactively involved and proper communications are being passed on and the consignment can easily flows and the preparations are already done in advance. So communication is another way through which you can increase your efficiency. And last is the controls. So need for control is amplified in the international realm. Many parties are involved, creating greater complexity. So since in international logistics, there are many parties who are involved, who mobilize the flow of the materials between various channel partners. So there are internal dynamics that need to be understood within an organization. Lacking full alignment towards strategic goals result in higher direct costs and can challenge the day-to-day flow of logistics operations. So considering implementing a centralized decision-making process, proper organizational structure and division of responsibilities, internal audits and of a formal problem-solving process that need to be taken into consideration, which is a part of my international flow, which talks about the controls, direct cost, challenge day-to-day of flow of logistics operations. Then also considering that level of decision making, whether it is done by the centralized team or it is being done by the what type of organizational structure we have there, and how the division of responsibilities are actually being managed in a supply chain or in the flow of the materials, which varies from organization to organization. Then you have the internal audits and following the problem solving approach. So with this, I can conclude the unit one, which is introduction to international logistics. Now move on to the second unit, which is basically talking about the Incoterms and terminologies of international trade. So Incoterm stands for international commercial terminologies, and the terminologies that are generally used in international trade. So if we talk from the perspective that how international trade comes into pictures, the international trade is not very new. So in the early 14, international traders located in different countries divides shorter abbreviations. So it is basically a type of language which is used between where two countries, where two countries are involved in the international trade. So, since the languages, business practices are different in different countries, so in order to make it simplified, there should be a common language which is easily understood by each and every country who is part of the global businesses. So, in order to overcome this differences in culture and practice, certain trade language has been created, which is a part of international business and has different meanings for different global participants because of the difference in languages and culture. It is actually becomes difficult to manage the practices which are being adopted. And in order to avoid any confusion and errors, which is a general part of the business, there's a body who generally jot down certain code of conduct which is being need to be followed by each and every countries who want to go into international business or international trading. And this is what is called as international commercial term or international commercial terminologies or Incoterms in short. So Incoterms, how we define Incoterms. So first, Incoterms practices was adopted in 2000, and that's why it is called as Incoterm 2000. And every 10 years down the line, we have a new and revised versions of Incoterm. For example, Incoterm 2000 followed by 2010, and then right now 2020 is being is uh, uh, is coming just in few days. So what exactly are Incoterms? Incoterms are standard rate definitions most commonly used in international space contracts. So this is what exactly is the definition of Incoterms, devised and published by International Chamber of Commerce, and they are at the heart of the world trade. So it is generally devised and developed and published by ICC International Chamber of Commerce. They are at the heart of uh, world trade. So this is how it is different. Incoterm background and purpose. So it was basically established in 1936 by the ICC International Chamber of Commerce in Paris, France. Uh, International commercial terms, Incoterms, are intended to facilitate trade by first, how you are going to standardize your shipping terminologies because most of the international trade or bulk trade is generally done by ships. So this is a definition of Incoterms basically to facilitate the movement of cargo or standardizing practices or terminologies which are generally used for shipping. Then you have yeah, they have created a set of rules for the interpretation of most commonly used terms in foreign trade. So whoever are involved in foreign trade, they can easily interpret the set of rules which are being put as a part of the Incoterms which are generally used in international trade. Third, Incoterms actually help us in establishing delivery responsibilities between seller and buyers under the contract of sales. When we talk about the contract of sales, it tells about at which points the actually the responsibility is going to shift from the buyer side to the seller side. So at which point of time place the liability is actually shift from one party to the another. So that is actually being clear through Incoterms. Now, some of the key points which are associated with Incoterms, it actually basically tells or focus on the seller's obligation to deliver the good. Incoterms establish number one, at what point the risk of loss or damage of the goods shift from the seller to the buyer. At what point the risk or loss or damage to the goods generally shift from one party, which is the seller, to the buyer. That is should be very clear. Then, at what point responsibility for transportation oblique customer related cost basically shift from seller to the buyer. So first is at what point the risk of loss or damage of goods shift. Then second, at what point the responsibilities of transportation or custom clearances or customer related cost basically shift from the seller to the buyer. Then third, who between the buyer and the seller is responsible for certain functional activities? Who are responsible for certain functional activities between the buyer and the seller? Fourth, who is responsible for export custom clearance? So when you deal with export custom clearances, who are responsible for export custom clearances part? Then procurement or transportation services, who are responsible for procurement or transportation services, and provision of commercial and transport documents. Who are responsible for commercial and transportation documentation. So these are basically associated with commercial and transport documentation activities. Now, if we go with a broader and try to understand the structure of Incoterms, so in 2000, we are generally talking about right now 2000, then we'll go to 2010. So in 2000, there are altogether 13 Incoterms, which were broadly classified by three code letters, which are like EXWON, DTP, etc. So altogether, there were 13 different Incoterms, and each of the 13 different Incoterms has three letters which defines a Incoterm. And each Incoterms, what does it means? It identify a name place, a port of shipment, a port of destination, or place of destination. So if you try to understand from where it is originated, the place, name place, the origin port, a port of shipment, which is a port of shipment, then the port of destinations where the material is going to be unloaded, or port of destination, and finally the place where it is being unloaded and received and to the given to the hands of the customer. So actually, there are four important points that need to be understood: origin point, origin port, destination port, and final destination. So four things need to be understood. Now, each of these 13 Incoterms, which are broadly made up of three letters, are broadly classified under four categories: E, F, C, and D. So they are basically four letters: E, F, C, and each group represents a different level of sellers and delivery responsibilities. So there are 13 letters, 13 Incoterms of three words each, and these 13 are further divided into four broader categories, starting with E, F, C, and D, where each of these letters tells clearly where the seller's responsibilities are going to be transferred to the buyers, at which location, whether it is the starting location or whether it is at the starting port or at the destination port or at finally at the destination. Certain now out of that there are certain Incoterms which are tended or which have been created purposely for a certain mode of transportation. For example, sea or inland water transportation. So there are certain Incoterms which have been created for certain purpose, either by sea or IWT, or called the inland water transportation. Now coming on to Incoterms and international sales contract. So any contract for the international sales of goods must include a reference to a specific Incoterms. So when we talk about Incoterms or international sales contract, the contract of the international sales of goods must include reference to specific Incoterms. Uh, by mode of transportation basically means whether we are going to use air, ocean, or multimodal transportation. Now, multimodal is a term which is generally used during the international transit of the cargo from one location to the another. The document will remain the same. So any contract for the international sales of goods must include the mode of transportation, the Incoterm, which primarily governs primary transaction and return goods, and the contract should also state the seller's delivery obligation are pursuant to the ICC Incoterm 2000 publication. That is the three things that need to be part of the sales contract. First, the mode of transportation. Second, the primary transactions and return goods. And third is the contract should also state that sellers delivery obligations, which are pursuant to the ICC Incoterm 2000 publication. Now, how to choose an Incoterms? Now, when we are going to choose an Incoterms, what is our basic understanding that what is our aversion to risk? We basically try to reduce or mitigate the risk part, reduce the level of the risk. That is the basic purpose of choosing an Incoterm. Then also to reduce the impact on the cash flow. Choose the Incoterms, we also have to see how it reduces transactional or operational cost. Then how we are going to negotiate on the transportation contracts. The transportation contracts need to be properly negotiated. Then we talk about the product characteristics, then product susceptibility to theft if there is a theft, then export licensing considerations, customer service advantage, and customer specific legislation. So these are all the things that need to be understood, which are associated with choosing an Incoterms. First, aversion to risk, impact on cash flow, ability to negotiate, transportation contracts, product characteristics, product susceptibility to theft, export licensing consideration, customer service advantage, and customer specific legislation. So these are the that 13 Incoterms, which was three letter each. So EXW stands for export, which is basically associated with the nameplate starting point. FCA free carrier, again starting with the nameplate. FAS free alongside ship, that is the name port of shipment, which is basically the origin point of shipment. Then FOB free on board, which is again the name port of shipment. CFR cost and freight, which is name port of destination, that is the receiving port. CIF, which include cost, insurance, and freight. Name port of destination. Then CPT, carriage paid to. Name place of destination, CIP, carriage and insurance paid to. Name place of destination, DF, delivery at frontier, which is basically the name place. DES, which is basically delivered ex-ship or the port of destination. Then DEQ, delivered ex-quay, which is basically name port of destination. Then DDU, delivered duty unpaid, name place of destination. DDP, delivery duty paid, which is name place of destination. So these are basically the Incoterms which was published in 2000, and each consists of 3 word letters. Now this is the table which clearly defines the Incoterm 2000 and what are the various activities which are being part of the Incoterm. Services in terms of warehouse storage, warehouse labor, export packaging, loading charges, inland freight, terminal charges, forwarder fees, loading on vessels, ocean/air freight, charges on arrival at destination, sorry, duty, taxes and custom clearances, delivery to destination. So these are basically the activities which is basically shared between the seller and the buyer. And if you see that X Works, all the responsibilities from the warehouse storage to warehouse labor to export packaging is being done by the seller. Then onward loading charges till inland freight, terminal charges, forwarder fees, loading on vessel, ocean air freight, charges on arrival at destination, duty, taxes and clearances, delivery to destinations, all being need to be beared by the buyer. Then we have the free carrier, free alongside ship, onboard vessels, cost and freight, cost, insurance and freight, carriage paid to, carriage insurance paid to, delivered at frontier, delivered, sorry, ex ship, delivered XQA duty unpaid. So kindly go through this table and take 2 minutes time in order to go through it and see if you have any queries associated with it so that that can be dealt with. Take 2 minutes time to see this table, and if you have any queries, kindly ask me. Gone through this table, and in case if there is any issue or questions, then you can ask right now. Okay. So Arundeep, if you are here and if you are listening me, if you have any query, you can ask me right now with this table, which is a part of this Incoterm 2000 series. So if you have any queries, you can right now ask, or else we can move to the next slide. Okay, that means you have no questions. So let's move to the second part. Now in 2010, yeah, you have any? Arundeep, you have any question?
Yeah, Shivariji, am I audible?
Yeah, it's audible.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question like, is the packing list and AW, AW notes are must and should in the shipping? We need to share to the Chamber of Commerce.
No. What exactly is the question?
Like from the supplier, like the packing list, the dimension of the packing.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it mandatory to share with the custom clearance, Chamber of Custom Clearance?
Yeah, it's not with the ICC International Chamber of Commerce that not need to be shared, but yeah, with the customer department, you need to share what exactly is the item which is being packed and how many numbers, what shape, what size. That should be clearly defined. Otherwise, it becomes difficult. And when the custom team comes and close the consignment, so for and which is ready for dispatch, so that need to be clearly mentioned in that document. What exactly is the item and how many numbers, quantity, shape, size, for what purpose. Everything that need to be, whether it is tax paid by the buyer or the seller, that need to be clearly defined into that.
Okay, and the attestation of Chamber of Commerce is must and should in the FOB and CAF and
ICC is basically International Chamber of Commerce is a body which act as a regulator. Basically, it's a regulator, or it's a body who has developed certain language, which we call it as Incoterms, which is generally all the members who has taken membership of ICC and those who are going for international trade. They should follow the rules and regulations which are created under Incoterm, because this is a common language. Basically, it's a business language which is common to each and everybody, because each country have their own rules and regulations. Currencies are different, and some meanings are totally different. So, in order to brought it at a common platform, ICC basically have created a language set of tools which is generally adopted and implemented by all the countries, but they are not a regulatory body or they are not a legal body. So it's like a open system, and all the members are participant and they can be part. In case of any litigation or any issue, then in the document it should be clearly mentioned under which country jurisdiction this will fall. So ICC has nothing to do with that also.
okay. What about the country of origin in the documentation? So in the services, I think country of origin table is not there. I mean, those documents are
Okay.
compulsory.
Yeah. That's true. These are basically the liability which is shifted from one side to the other. For example, when we talk about warehouse storage or warehouse labor and export packaging in EXW, Works, so
Okay.
that is basically means the origin place, which is basically the seller. Fine. Now, at the gate of the seller, the X Works price are being quoted, so which includes the holding of the material, the raw material cost, the packaging, and the export packaging. Now the buyer has the responsibility to brought its freight or the truck and load the material, and he has to bear all the onward cost associated with that. So broadly, if we define international logistics, there are 4 points. One is name place or place of origin, then place of port of origin, then port of destination, which is on the seller side generally, and the place finally where the material need to be placed. So all these activities are actually being distributed between the buyer and seller, and the Incoterms clearly tells at what points the liability is going to be shifted from one party to the another, which is basically from the buyer to the seller, or seller to the buyer rather.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah, fine. Got it.
So this is basically Incoterm 2000. Now, currently we are adopting Incoterm 2010, which is rightly used till date. There are certain changes because some of the Incoterms which are being created in 2000 was not fully utilized. So as a result of which ICC further decided with all the members who are participating in the global trade that we are going to merge some of the Incoterms and try to create some of the Incoterms which are very much relevant and which are being generally used and practiced by all the global countries, or all the countries who are doing global trade. So I'm going to move towards the Incoterm 2010. Fine.
Yeah, fine. And
Yeah.
hello.
Right.
Yeah, so then I have a question. Like, if we, I mean, supply the goods through FedEx or any XYZ courier, does the CBO also require, or else FedEx can, I mean, like any courier service can clear the, what are the, I mean, clearance procedures out there?
No, clearance procedures will be there. So they have the, because see, FedEx is basically a service provider, a 3PL, a logistic company, like a truck service provider or a ship service. So they have to go through custom clearances, and there is a freight forwarder who provides all the custom clearances exercise that need to be done. So yeah, that is basically involved into that business. Depends upon the nature of the cargo also.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Thanks.
Okay. So if we talk about Incoterm 2010, so Incoterm 2000 has 13 Incoterms. Now Incoterm 2010, they have reduced two, and while doing the reduction, what they do, they have deleted four of the previous Incoterms, and they created two new by merging two of the Incoterms. So Incoterm 2010 was basically originated in January 1 or implemented in January 1, 2011, and has been used till date. And Incoterm 2020 is in pipeline but not implemented till date. So available worldwide through 100 international members or who are members of ICC. As it is, as I initially told you, that they aren't laws. These terms are not law. Uh, uh, no laws that require their use and not at all inclusive, and they are country neutral. They do not favor any country. That means these laws or ICC do not favor any country specific, and they are self-contained. All information that determines at what point the liability or responsibility is shifting from one player to the another.
Okay.
So if we define the entire journey of Incoterm between the transportation definitions, they generally classified into three broader categories: pre-carriage, main carriage, and on-carriage. So what is pre-carriage? Anything which is from the starting origin point till the main port, port of origin, shipment port. We call it as main pre-carriage. So which basically involves the inland transportation on the seller side. So from domestic, if we talk about from the domestic transportation, then from the place where the shipment starts to any subsequent transportation carriage. But specifically when we talk about from the international perspective, it is actually from the place where the shipment start to the departure point of the seller side. We call it as pre-carriage. Now main carriage is basically when the cargo is in the international waters. That means the shipment from the origin port and between the shipment to the destination port. So that part, when the cargo is in international water, we call it as main carriage. So domestic, it has not much meaning, but still we divide into domestic and international. So subsequent transportation beyond pre-carriage, we call it as, in domestic, we call it as main carriage. But when it comes to international carriage, transportation from the point of departure on the seller side to the arrival point on the buyer side. We call it as main carriage. And the third part, which we call it as on carriage, which is from the destination port till the destination where the customers or the receiver is there. So transportation from the arrival point to the buyer side, and on carriage is basically subsequent transportation beyond the main carriage. So this is how we transportation definition is generally being defined: pre-carriage, main carriage, and on carriage. I hope it is clear.
Yes.
Okay. So the same thing, pre-carriage, main carriage, and on carriage is further defined as door-to-door service, contract of carriage that includes pre-carriage, main carriage, and on carriage. So door-to-door, or when we see door-to-door services being given by the carrier, that means it includes everything: pre, main, and on carriage. When it is say that door to air or port, that means contract of carriage includes pre-carriage and main carriage to the airport or ocean port or truck terminal port or rail port. When we say airport to air or port to port, That means contract of carriage is generally done through main carriage only. And when it is airport to door, then contract of carriage include main carriage and on carriage. So same thing, pre-carriage, main carriage, and on carriage is further divided between the type of services which are being offered, which is door to door, door to air, or door to port, or air to air, or port to port, or air or port to door. This is how the entire thing need to be further divided between these three service providers. So when we talk about the relationship between the buyer and sellers, which are basically which are abiding the Incoterms or international commercial terminologies, that is, it is first clearly defined the mode of delivery, who has the arranged to custom clearances and licenses, who will be managing the custom clearances activities and the licenses which are necessary in order to go for the export process or with the import one. Then passage of title, which is basically with the ownership of the goods. Then transfer of risk and insurance responsibilities, which are generally being part of insurance and merchandise during the transport of the goods. Then what will be the delivery terms in terms of whether it will be shipped through uh, what type of packing material, where the tax need to be paid, whether it is tax paid or tax exempted material, that need to be clearly defined, or at which location it is going to be delivered to the customers. Then how transport cost will be allocated between the parties if the sharing of the transportation cost is being done, or who will bear the entire transport cost on the buyer side or on the seller side, and everything that need to be clearly defined. And when a delivery will be completed with the date and time and the conditions, all need to be clearly defined in the Incoterm. Then difference between a contract versus a Incoterm. So contract is more of a legal word which is generally used. The Incoterm do not constitute a contract between a buyer and seller. So Incoterm doesn't clearly define a type of legal document between a buyer and the seller, which is the importer and the exporter. It only clearly defines the obligation and understanding between the both the parties. So there's no legal obligation between that. Contract signed between a buyer and the seller has Incoterms inbuilt into it, but that has nothing or no legal obligations. In the event of dispute, both the parties, the sale contract would take a precedence. So contract will take into come into pictures in case of any dispute between both the parties, that is the buyer and the seller. So Incoterms will not define contractual rights between the buyer and the sellers. It defines only the liabilities and obligation between the parties, and at what point it is going to transfer from one hand to the other, that is from the seller to the buyer. Specify transport details such as transfer or delivery of the merchandise. Dictate how the title of the merchandise will pass between the seller and the buyer, even though Incoterms can dictate when they can transfer, at what locations or at what point during the entire transit it is going to get transferred from one party to the another. Dictate obligations with regard to the merchandise prior to and after delivery, and protect a party from risk or loss. So basically, it's a risk aversion tool. It is not meant to make money or not meant to no brought into certain legal obligations. It is just a tool which actually help us in making the transportation easy. The communication between both the parties should be very clearly defined, and who will be taking responsibilities where there are various activities that need to be performed in the entire journey between from the origin of which is from the seller side to the buyer side. Each and everything should be clearly defined using a contract versus a Incoterm. So what are the various dangers if we don't or they are improper use of Incoterms? If used properly, Incoterms can help us in making the entire journey risk-free and risk burden proof, makes the obligation risk burden proof, and they exactly each party know what price and what role and responsibility they have to take into considerations, and there should be no hidden or unexpected cost. And these cost or charges, actually, if there's certain hidden thing is there, then that will lead into a certain type of disputes. So clearly their rules and cost are agreed between both the parties when they enter into a contract, depending upon what Incoterms they are choosing, and that clearly defines their roles and responsibility which they have to follow. uh, Incoterms 2000 covers four areas of international transaction: division of cost between buyer and sellers as it relates to banking, packing, and transportation, the forwarder fees, custom house broker fees, duties, and ancillary charges relevant to a particular transaction, division of responsibility in selecting the carrier, forwarder, and custom house broker, how I'm going to select my carrier, how I'm going to select the freight forwarder and custom house, division of risk in international transportation of the cargo from the seller facility to the main delivery point, and definition of who will provide the documentation. See, international business is very complex because there are multiple parties are involved. For example, if we talk specifically from the shipping business, ships are owned by one party, ships are operated by another parties, and the load or the cargo which are being booked for these shippers are by somebody else. So you can understand that within that shipping business, the business becomes so complex, and no, a small no, negotiation on the price of the shipment of the goods can save a large amount of money, and if not done properly, can actually lead into a huge amount of loss for both the parties between the buyer and the sellers. So when you choose the Incoterms, it clearly defines what is your risk and responsibility, how much cost is involved into that, what are the various risk involved, who are the bankers, who are the freight forwarders, which are the carriers you are choosing, which are the custom house brokers which you are there. So each and again the documentation issues which are involved in the international business. So I hope it is clear.
Yes.
Any questions? Because with this slide I'm going to stop, because the next few slides are there which I have already discussed, the type of transportation between party A and B. So door to door and main carriage and pre carriages are involved. So I'm quickly going through it. So if you have any queries associated with that, uh, okay, one more thing which is missed is that I need to cover which part is being merged. Yeah, this is very important. As I told you that how it is different 2000 versus 2010. So as you clearly sees that there are four arrows. So DEQ, DES, DAF, and DDU are omitted in 2010, and out of these four they have created two more new, which is called DAT, delivered at terminal, and DAP, delivered at place. Along with that, they have created the Incoterms, which are something which are related with marine restricted and omnimodal for a single mode of transportation. So these things are clearly defined in Incoterm 2000 and 2010, and uh, nothing much into that. There are some questions which need to be understood when while deciding a question Incoterms. So now, who furnishes the good, who packs the good, who moves the good, who arranges for the export clearances, who arranges for the main carriage, who pays for the main carriage, who is involved for the insurance part of the shipment, who arranges for import clearances, who pays import duties, who pays for on carriage from the arrival port and the delivery destination, and who arranges and pays for country specific documentation. These are major things that need to be understood and should be very clear while deciding any Incoterm uh, what we are considering. I hope it is clear.
Yes, clear.
Okay, any questions which is there in your mind, or if you want to ask, or else you can write it down to me also, no issue.
Sure. I'm clear, Tiwari ji.
Okay. Thank you so much. So with this, I am closing the session today. Thank you for being a patient listener. Thank you so much.